My health's been declining recently. To support my mother-in-law with her health issues, our family decided to temporarily live in her house. And so began our days of being constantly bossed around by my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. Then, one day, as my husband was driving, a call came in from my mother-in-law on his cell phone. Because of the poor signal, we put the call on speaker mode. Is she still alive? Stubborn, isn't she? If I wasn't there, she might have been seriously dead. Unaware that they were on a call, the two began their alarming conversation. And just like that, their sinister plan crumbled. Next, they were to receive social penalties for their outrageous actions. My name is Wendy. I live happily with my husband Tony and our beloved daughter Vicky. Our daughter has recently started kindergarten and she seems to be having a great time every day. Seeing her like this brings a smile to my face each day. Then, one day, my husband got a call from my mother-in-law, Barbara. My health's been declining recently, she said in a weak voice. Barbara had suffered a stroke in the past, leaving her with a slight paralysis in her limbs. That being said, her symptoms were not severe, and she was able to live her life without major inconvenience, walking around with a cane. According to her, the after effects of the stroke seemed to be causing her pain. It's hard to live like this. I'm not getting any younger, and if something were to happen, I might not be as lucky as your father was. Barbara continued nervously. What about we all live at your place until your health stabilizes? Catching me off guard. What about your brother, Matt? As far as I knew, Matt, Tony's brother, was living with my mother-in-law. But according to her, Matt was busy job hunting and she didn't feel secure with him alone. I was torn. To be honest, I didn't get along well with Barbara. She always had a lot to say and I had experienced her being rather harsh towards me in the past. But it wasn't just me who had issues with my mother-in-law. My husband, Tony, didn't exactly have the best relationship with his mother either. Apparently, she had always favored Matt, the eldest son, while Tony was treated as if he were an afterthought. When I broached the topic, Tony replied with a troubled look. That's true, but still, I am her son. Indeed, this seemed like a sentiment typical of Tony, a man of strong responsibility. Out of respect for my husband, I agreed to the temporary move to my in-laws' house. Moving homes is a big deal. Fortunately, our home and the in-laws' home aren't too far apart. Our daughter, Vicky, probably won't even need to change her kindergarten. Also, Vicky herself seemed fairly excited about the idea. So, I convinced myself, thinking, it's just until Barbara's health improves. With that, we started our life at my in-laws' house. But my burden turned out to be more than I had expected. First off, the house itself is pretty old, and its size means housework is quite a struggle. The time required for cleaning is off the charts. What's more, the volume of cooking and laundry has nearly doubled. I was under the impression that I'd just be helping my mother-in-law, but in reality, most of the housework fell on my shoulders. And while I was working hard, my mother-in-law was. Vicky, darling, it's such a lovely day, why don't we go shopping together? I want to come. And off she'd go, enthusiastically spending time with her granddaughter. And then, you see, that painting of Matt's won a gold medal. Oh, really? That's interesting. Hey! Are you really listening? This is the amazing part. She'd ramble on endlessly about trivial past achievements of her favorite son, all while munching on snacks. To be honest, it was seriously annoying. She seems to be in great shape. How is she in poor health? I eyed my mother-in-law with suspicion. Suddenly, she started coughing as if she was startled. Am I imagining the insincerity here? Well, let's end my rant about my mother-in-law here. Next is about my brother-in-law. He was also a significant pain in the neck. Contrary to the stories I'd heard, Matt turned out to be a jobless singleton almost entirely dependent on his parents. And his thoughts and actions were so childish, it was hard to believe he was a man in his 40s. Wendy, I'm hungry. Where's my lunch? Wendy, why didn't you wake me up? I missed my favorite show. I found myself catering to him as well. Even Vicky, my daughter, helps out around the house. He seemed to think he was entitled to having others look after him. I'm not your wife, nor your mother. I screamed inside my head. The fact that he called me Wendy darling was also creepy. Moreover, there was something unnerving about the way he looked at me. So, I was leading a tough life, both physically and emotionally, due to these two people, but one night, several relatives had gathered for a drinking party at our home. I went upstairs to fetch a fan to improve the ventilation in the living room. The fan should be around here somewhere. Wendy. When I turned around, my brother-in-law was standing behind me out of nowhere. Then, with a smirk on his face, he said something unbelievable. Why don't you ditch boring Tony and start over with me? I couldn't believe my ears. But it seemed I had heard him right. He was ogling me with a lascivious grin on his face. He might have been emboldened by alcohol, but his remark was disgustingly crude to the extreme. Brother-in-law, you're clearly too drunk. That's not funny, even as a joke. Huh? Are you sure you want to reject me? I might spill your secret to Tony, you know? What? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm busy, so I'll leave now. With that, I tried to ignore him and head downstairs. But he forcefully grabbed my arm out of the blue. Come on, I'm way better than Tony. Stop it, just stop it. Startled, I jerked my arm away from my brother-in-law. Unexpectedly, Matt lost his footing due to my sudden resistance. He tumbled down the stairs, ultimately hitting the back of his head against the wall with a groan. Hearing the commotion, Tony and other relatives rushed over. Hey, what's going on here? Oh, Matt just slipped. Oh my! Look at that bump on his head. While his mother fretted over him, shaking him violently. Other family members managed to calm her down and took Matt to another room for first aid. Amid all the confusion, my quarrel with Matt was forgotten. I contemplated whether to tell Tony about Matt's advances but decided to stay silent for now, not wanting to cause unnecessary worry. If Matt's actions escalated, I would speak up. With that thought, I made my way towards the living room where everyone was gathered. Then, in the corner of the hallway, I saw Vicky looking at me with a worried expression. I'm sorry if I scared you, honey. Did I wake you up? Let's get you back to bed. Okay. Something about Vicky's demeanor felt off. But it was late, and I didn't question further, taking her to her room to put her back to bed. Life remained difficult due to my mother-in-law and Matt. Every day, I was forced to entertain my mother-in-law's uninteresting chatter and attend to my immature brother-in-law's needs. I felt like running away. However, Matt hadn't made any more advances since that incident. It seemed he had learned his lesson after my strong rebuff. With that, I felt a bit relieved and carried on with my life at my in-laws. But then, on a particular day, another unexpected incident befell me. I was having lunch with my mother-in-law as usual, when I suddenly felt dizzy after eating some tomato soup. Next, I was hit with intense nausea and difficulty breathing. I recognized this sensation. Yes, it was an anaphylactic shock, an allergic reaction. I have a severe allergy to peanuts, and if I consume even a single one, I can have breathing difficulties. Luckily, my brother-in-law was at home so we could quickly call an ambulance. Seeing me in distress, he rushed to pull out his smartphone, his fingers seeming to falter. It looked like he had become too flustered to remember the number. When I managed to gasp out 911, he finally started pressing the buttons on his phone. Despite some fumbling, he managed to call an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital where my life was saved. Lying in the hospital bed, I thanked my brother-in-law. Thank you, brother. Oh, thank you so much. You saved Wendy's life. Tony cried, tears in his eyes as he grasped his brother's hand. Taken aback, my brother-in-law replied, a bit bashfully. Well, I just did what any person would do. Although I was annoyed to admit it, even such a despicable person can be useful at times. I had to admit, I saw him in a slightly different light after that. But as much as I felt gratitude towards my brother-in-law, something else was bothering me. Why had I had an allergic reaction? Afterward, I stayed in the hospital for observation for one day. The next day, I was discharged without any complications and got into the car that Tony was driving to return to my in-laws' house. In the car, my daughter Vicky asked with concern, "Are you okay, Mom?" "Yes, I'm fine now. I'm sorry for worrying you. I thought my heart was going to stop when I heard you had been taken to the hospital." I was careful with the ingredients, though. I tilted my head and said. Just then, Tony's phone rang. "Oh, it's Mom." Because he was driving, he quickly switched to speakerphone. However, it seemed like there was a problem with the connection, and we couldn't hear what she was saying clearly. Hello? That's strange. After a few seconds, we finally entered a stable call mode, but it seemed my mother-in-law hadn't noticed. She spoke to my brother-in-law Matt with a troubled voice. It seems like the call got cut off. Can't Tony even answer the phone properly? He's really useless. Their conversation made our faces pale. And she's still alive? She's really stubborn, isn't she? Mom, you shouldn't say things like that. If I hadn't been there, she might have really died. Doesn't matter. It's just karma for hurting my precious Matt. Well, I did think it served her right. So, what are we going to do about Wendy? Yeah, I'll try to win her over again. I think I can make it work this time. I mean, she probably fell for me again after this incident. After all, I'm her lifesaver, aren't I? Unaware that they were being heard, they continued their alarming conversation. Meanwhile, Tony and I were left speechless, exchanging glances. Later, we arrived at my in-laws' house later than scheduled. You sure took your time. Tony, you should have answered the phone. I wanted you to get something on your way back. They greeted us as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Tony and I had stern looks on our faces. Well, we had to stop by the police station. Police station? Did you lose something? Vicky, your dad and I need to have a serious talk. Can you go to your room for a bit? Sure. As our daughter headed for her room, I thrust Tony's phone towards my in-laws. Then, I replayed their conversation that had been recorded. As a matter of fact, I had quickly set Tony's phone to record mode at that time. Upon hearing this, my in-laws' faces turned pale with shock. What? How did you? I continued, glaring at the two who wore guilty expressions. What in the world is going on here? Well, that was just a joke. Sort of a small payback for you rejecting Matt. Stop it, Mom! Don't mention! The brother-in-law stammers, trying to stop his mother from digging herself deeper. But it was already too late. What? She rejected Matt! What is this about? As I explained to my husband, his normally gentle face transformed into something monstrous. Then, he furiously started questioning his mother and brother. Before his onslaught, they confessed everything. It turned out that my mother-in-law was attempting to set me up with Matt. Worse still, the brother-in-law seemed to be on board with the plan. So, she had feigned illness to lure me to their house. The idea of trying to turn her daughter-in-law into her son's fiancé was so outlandish, I was chilled to my bones. The reason for this bizarre plan? They felt sorry for Matt, being single despite being the older brother. Their lack of empathy was so astounding, I could hardly believe they were human. Needless to say, their selfish scheme didn't pan out. And Matt ended up tumbling down the stairs in a pitiful fashion. As I remembered the events, I shuddered. At the same time, something my brother-in-law had said stuck in my mind. What secret about me were you using as a threat? With a side glance at my husband, he grudgingly replied, It was about that $50,000 you're hiding. It appeared he was after my personal wealth as well. But he was way off the mark. He and my mother-in-law assumed that I was secretly earning money through stock trading or foreign exchange, but in reality, the money was from my hobby of writing, which I'd been doing for some time. In other words, it was a savings account approved by my husband, not some hidden wealth. He's always told me, that money is something you earned with your own hard work, Wendy. You can use it whenever you think it's necessary. Apparently, my brother-in-law had seen my bank book by chance when he visited our house and told his mother about it. Why not make her your wife then? She had suggested. Indeed, it's quite a horror story. Anyway, the plot between the two of them was quickly thwarted. As for my mother-in-law, it seems she was in revenge mode because I not only rejected Matt's advances but also caused him to get injured. So, she conspired with Matt to mix peanut powder into my lunch. She probably thought that they could retrieve the $50,000 later. But, seeing me suffering more than he expected, Matt became frightened and hurriedly called an ambulance. By the way, it seems my mother-in-law had been trying to get the passcode for the bank account from Vicky all this time. Of course, there was no way my daughter would know the number, so it was a wasted effort, but she seemed to be filling my daughter's head with nonsense like, Mommy is doing something wrong to make money. Grandma will take care of it. Oh, don't tell Mommy about this. If you do, she might get arrested by the police. That day, the mystery of my daughter's strange behavior towards me was finally solved. What were you thinking, scaring your own grandchild like that? Aren't you ashamed of trying to steal your younger brother's wife? I always thought you were a fool, but I never expected this. As Tony voiced his anger and disbelief, his fists trembling, Matt, perhaps feeling his pride hurt, retorted, "Hey, don't get cheeky just because you're my younger brother. I'm way more handsome than you. If I had met Wendy before you did, she would have definitely married me." This further fueled Tony's anger. But there was someone even angrier than my husband. Yes, that was me. You've got to be kidding! Tony is a decent human being unlike you. There's no way I would marry a deluded jerk like you, even if hell freezes over. You middle-aged narcissist! Grow up and stop adding darling to my name. Before I knew it, I was shouting every insult I could think of. Matt seemed to shrink under my intense glare and harsh words. Regaining my composure, I cleared my throat and told them in a calm voice. Anyway, your actions have crossed a line. I almost died, so I will be filing a criminal complaint for assault. Please pay the damages. I consulted at the local police station earlier. They advised me to discuss this with you first since we are family, but I have no intention of doing that now. No way. You're going to sue us. Faced with our wrath, the two of them were pale as a ghost, prostrating themselves on the ground. Then they started to plead with us in trembling voices, trying to get us to drop the lawsuit. Wait! We didn't think you'd be hurt that badly. Yes, that's right. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. Forgive us, we're family, right? At their pleas, Tony and I exchanged looks and started discussing. Just then, Vicky entered the room. Perhaps she was bothered by the commotion. Suddenly, my mother-in-law said with a forced smile, "Come on, Vicky, I'm a little busy right now, let's go back to your room." At that moment, I hastily called out to my daughter. "Did you, by any chance, tell your grandma about Mommy's peanut allergy?" "Yes. She told me to tell her about you, so I said that even one peanut would make it impossible for you to breathe and you'd die." As I gently stroked my daughter's head, I then sent a cold glare at the two of them. There's no room for sympathy here. Accept your social sanctions quietly. And so, the two of them, cast aside by me, were stunned and fell apart on the spot. Later, we hired a lawyer and formally charged my mother-in-law and brother-in-law with assault. Because it was a family dispute, they didn't end up in prison, but they had to pay about $13,000 for my medical expenses, compensation, and the like. Naturally, neither of them had any savings to cover this, having led such a dissolute life. In the end, they reluctantly sold their family home for cash and made the payment. And as for the two of them now without a home. Sigh, it's going to be a little cramped in that house if all 5 of us are going to live there. Tony, when are we going to do the extension and remodeling? Unbelievably, they seemed fully prepared to live in our house. These people are truly hopeless. Of course, such a ridiculous proposal wouldn't stand a chance. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? Talk in your sleep when you're asleep. It was probably an explosion of pent-up frustration. The two of them, vehemently rejected by us, hastily left the scene. We heard that they later rented a room in a rundown apartment. They are said to be living a tough life, surviving on the wages my brother-in-law earns from his part-time job. On the other hand, we had returned to our own home for the first time in half a year. Ah, such a peaceful atmosphere. I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm sorry. It's my fault for deciding to live together. I should have thought more about it. Don't worry about it. It's your seriousness that I like, that's why I married you. Yes, my husband Tony often gets the short end of the stick due to his serious nature. But that's why, no, precisely because of that, I respect him. I continued speaking to my dejected husband. You looked brave and cool when you punched Matt. Violence isn't good, though. Hearing that, my husband chuckled sheepishly. Then, as he was holding our daughter, he said, That's right, how about we all go out for some fun next week? Vicky, where do you want to go? The zoo. Watching my daughter laugh with excitement, I savored the happiness. And I made a vow to continue saving that money for my daughter's future. I promise. When I told my mill I was going back to my hometown to give birth. By all means, go back. I don't want to see your face. I was delighted from the bottom of my heart as I was waiting for those words. You won't have to see me anymore, rest assured. What? I am Emily, about to turn 28. My mother died from illness when I was only 2. Since my father, a busy man, ran a clothing company with a 100-year-old tradition, I was looked after by my grandmother as he worked. My father was very strict, and I lived my life just as he told me to. Perhaps because of that, I had never dated a man, but I had given up, thinking it was destiny. After graduating from college, I worked briefly as my father's secretary at his company, but he said it was hard for him to work together and forced me to quit. I didn't get a job after that. Because my father strongly stated that I don't need to work. However, my friends from university got jobs and started dating and getting married one after another, so I wanted to work too. I told my father one night, "Dad, can I work?" "No." He said one word without asking for a reason. "Why not?" "Because you don't need to work. But I also need to go out into society and gain more experience." Emily, don't talk back. I'm not talking back. I'm not saying anything wrong. You should just stay home, Emily. If you say that, I'll leave home. I'll leave home and go to work from there. Emily, stop it. No. I'm an adult. I won't always do as you say. I cried and left the place. Even in my room, I cried for a long time. After a while, I called my friend from college, Lisa. Can I come to your house now? Sure, but what's wrong? And can you go out at this time? I can't right now, but I'll figure it out. Can I stay at your place for a while? Lisa's apartment was a luxury condominium gifted by her parents, boasting 3 rooms. Seems like something's up. That's fine, just be careful on your way here. Quietly, I pulled out my suitcase, packed my belongings, and stealthily left the house so as not to alert my father. I left a note on my desk stating that I was going to stay with a friend. Once outside, I hailed a taxi and headed towards Lisa's apartment. Upon arriving at Lisa's apartment, I was greeted with my favorite coffee that she had prepared. Thank you, Lisa. What's going on, Emily? I explained everything about the argument with my father and my subsequent departure from home. That's awful, Emily. You've had no freedom at all. Her words brought tears to my eyes once again. Until now, I did everything my father said and thinking it was normal. But suddenly, I've started craving my own freedom. That's completely normal. It's strange that your father doesn't allow you to work. I'd like to meet many people and have a good time too. So does your dad know you're here? I left a note saying I was going to a friend's place, but he doesn't know any of my friends. He might be frantically searching for you right now. Maybe. It's late now. Shall we go to bed? Yeah, I am really tired. Lisa prepared a separate room for me to sleep in. The next day, Lisa left for work. When I checked my phone, I saw about 10 missed calls from my dad. I felt sorry for him and sent him an email to assure him not to worry. In the evening, after Lisa finished work, she called me. I'm going out for a drink, why don't you join us? Having little experience with social drinking, I was excited about going out. When I arrived at the location Lisa mentioned, I found her waiting with 2 men. Sorry for keeping you waiting. So, who are these gentlemen? Pointing to the shorter man, Lisa said. This is my boyfriend. And the tall guy over there, he's single and ready to mingle. The tall man introduced himself with a refreshing smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Max, pleased to make your acquaintance. Oh, nice to meet you, I'm Emily. That's how our relationship started. Max worked at a small company in the apparel industry. For a moment, I thought it was a company similar to my father's, but I quickly dismissed the thought. Max's family was the opposite of mine, with only his mother around, but he didn't discuss the reason and I didn't ask. One day, Max said to me, "I'd like to meet your father, Emily." I had been emailing my father several times since I left home, but I had no intention of going back home yet, so I didn't want to meet him. "I'll think about it. But I would like to meet your mom, Max." "Sure, when?" "Even today is fine, if you want." "Really, today is fine?" "Then I should buy some kind of gift." "Yeah, my mom loves that kind of thing." As I found out later, my MIL didn't just love that kind of thing, she got very cranky if I didn't bring those kind of things for her. On the way to Max's house, I bought a cake at a bakery. Upon arrival at Max's house, my MIL was waiting for us at the front door. When I asked Max why his mother was there, he told me he had sent her a message from the bakery. My MIL stared at me and asked, "And your name is?" I'm Emily." "Nice to meet you. What do you do for a living?" "I'm currently unemployed, but I plan to work soon." "Oh, so you're just idling about. How nice it must be to be a rich young lady." "I'm not rich. That's why I want to work." "You don't need to talk back." "What do your parents do?" "My mother passed away when I was young. My father works at a company." Max, who had been watching my conversation with his mother from the side, said, "How long are you two going to talk here? Let's go inside." "Right. By the way, Max, did she bring anything? Surely she didn't come empty-handed?" In a rush, I handed my MIL the paper bag containing the cake. This isn't much, but..." Grabbing the bag almost violently from my hand, she peered inside and commented, "I didn't really need anything, but I guess I'll take it." In the few minutes I had spent talking to my MIL, I had grown to despise her. And I felt sorry for anyone who had to call such a person MIL. Entering the living room, my MIL bombarded me with questions and I gave her only bland answers. Regardless, she continued to interrogate me relentlessly, almost as if I were a criminal suspect. Exhausted by the barrage of one-sided questions, I told Max the moment her line of questioning eased. "Max, I think I should go soon." At that, my MIL's face turned red with anger. "Do you really hate being with me that much? You've been giving half-hearted replies to my questions this whole time." "Mom, please, calm down." "Max, why on earth did you bring such a rude woman here? There must be better women out there." I snapped back at her. "What about me is rude, exactly? If there's something I should improve, then tell me so I can work on it." That seemed to incense my MIL even further. "You're quite cheeky, aren't you? All you have to do is answer my questions." "I've been answering everything you've asked." "You dislike me, don't you? I can see it in your face." I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. "I'm just tired and would like to go home." "Well, aren't you audacious? I wonder what kind of education your parents gave you. They mustn't have been good parents. I would love to see what they look like." Hearing her badmouth my parents, I was overwhelmed with sadness and began to cry. "Oh dear, now you're crying for sympathy. If you want to go home so badly, then go. It will be a breath of fresh air. Also, I'm going to feed this cake you brought to my dog, Charlie. But Charlie is quite a pampered pooch, so he might not eat such a cheap cake. Laughing, my MIL pointed at the cake I had bought. Mom, enough is enough. Max, you really have no eye for women. Max frowned at his mother's comment and retorted. Why are you always so argumentative? Can't you act more mature for once? Max shot back, causing his mother to lose her energy instantly. All I want is a good wife for you, Max. I get that, but I'm an adult too, you know. I'm not a kid anymore, so I can handle my own stuff. Hearing Max's words, his mother's eyes filled with tears, and she left the room. With a teary face, I decided to leave too, but Max followed me and apologized. Emily, I'm sorry for all the harsh words my mom said. She must be just jealous thinking that she's losing me to you. I'll talk to her about this, okay? Please don't let this discourage you from coming again. I'm really hurt by what your mother said about my parents, Max. I don't want to see your mother again. The moment I said that, a wave of sadness overwhelmed me, and I burst into tears, throwing myself into Max's arms. Max held me close and after a while, suggested, How about we go somewhere now? Barely nodding, I left the house with Max. Since Max didn't have a car, we took the train and got off at a station by the beach. We sat on a bench on the sandy beach, staring at the sea for a long time. 2 months passed since then. I found out that I was pregnant. When I consulted Max about it, he proposed. Let's get married. We don't have to have a ceremony, but we'll make it official. We can live in my house, okay? I don't make much at my job, so I can't afford to rent an apartment. I'll make sure to talk to my mom about not saying unnecessary things to you, Emily. Living with his mother wasn't ideal for me, but there was no other place to live. Okay, I'll try my best to get along with your mother. Thus, I ended up living with my MIL. Because I was getting married, I went back home to tell my father about it. He looked delighted when he saw me. It's good to see you looking well. I know we've been in touch, but it's been a while since I last saw you. I'm sorry, Dad. I have something important to tell you. My father's expression changed immediately. I told him about my encounter with Max, my pregnancy, and our plan to get married. My father listened silently. When I finished, he simply said, Well, congratulations. Can't wait to meet my grandchild. His smile looked forced. Dad, thank you. I'm sorry for bringing such sorrow as a daughter, I said as tears flowed down my face. My dad was also crying. I expected him to be angry, but his gentle words hurt me even more. I ended up moving into my MIL's house. Lisa, who had been taking care of me ever since I left my home, said to me, You better show me your cute baby's face soon. Yeah, of course. And you should get married soon, too. I want to get married soon too, but he just won't make up his mind. But I think it'll work out somehow. Let's go out for dinner together again. I planned to move on Sunday, but my MIL said it was a bad luck day, so I changed it to Saturday. The move was completed safely on Saturday morning. While the movers were carrying my belongings, my MIL just stood there, watching them. She was repeatedly told by the movers to step back because it was dangerous, but she wouldn't move. When the move was over, my MIL called me over and said, You didn't give them what they're supposed to get, right? I didn't understand. Huh? It seemed she misunderstood me pretending not to know, and she went away and handed something to the leader of the movers. Seeing that, I understood what she was saying but when she came back to me, she said, Emily dear, it seemed like you didn't want to part with your money, so I gave it for you. Of course, you'll pay me back later. She then told me an absurd amount of money. It was way beyond what was generally considered reasonable, so I said, "You gave them that much?" "Oh dear, was that bad?" "It's not bad, but I think the amount was a little too much." It's the thought that counts in these situations. If you skimp, you'll be cursed. I'm not saying I'm skimping. I didn't say anything more because I knew it would lead to another argument. My MIL had this face saying, "I'm right no matter what you say." That's when Max showed up and said to my MIL, "Mom, what's up? What did you say to Emily?" "Just nothing." My MIL replied succinctly, then walked off. "You okay?" "I told her not to mess with you, you know." "Thanks." Deciding not to mention to Max that I almost had another argument with my MIL. I knew if I did, he might mention it to her, causing her to grow even more hostile towards me. After moving in, my MIL barely spoke to me, obviously avoiding me. There were even weeks where she wouldn't utter a word to me, and those days were bliss. One day, Max brought home some work documents in an envelope. It was marked with a company name, Star Textiles Inc., and that made me gasp. That was a name I had heard many times during my time working for my dad's company. They were one of our subcontractors. I asked Max, "Is this your company's envelope?" "Yeah, why?" "I was just wondering. I just realized that I didn't know much about your company." I didn't tell him that his company was a subcontractor to my father's. For some reason, I felt it was better not to say anything. "Well, we're just a small subcontractor. If our parent company decided to drop us, we'd go bankrupt instantly and all the employees would lose their jobs." Max laughed with his wistful look. About a month later, Max started coming home late from work. He also seemed down, so I asked him, "You've been coming home late recently. Is something wrong? You don't seem yourself." He admitted and said, "The company's in trouble." "What, like going bankrupt?" Max nodded. "The parent company suddenly decided to cut our orders by half. Now, our boss is begging them every day to continue business as usual. We're also looking for new clients, but if neither of those things work out, we're going bankrupt." As I listened to Max's story, I thought about asking my dad to help Max's company. But my father is strict about his work, so he would never help a business partner out of personal feelings. For some reason, the number of business partners must have been halved. I told him that my father's company is the parent company of Max's. Max was surprised at first, but then told me with a twinkle in his eyes, "Emily, please, beg your father not to reduce his business with us." "I'm sorry, Max. My father is strict in business. He would never make such a decision based on personal matters. Could you at least try, Emily? It won't help." As I said this, Max got down on his knees before me. "Please, I beg you." "Stop it, Max, don't do this. I'll talk to my father, but I know it won't make a difference." As Max raised his head, tears of relief streamed down his face. That night, I called my father and explained Max's desperate plea. "So, the company Max works for is Star Textiles. I guess I have to help them then." I was surprised. I had expected my father, with his strict business mindset, to refuse outright. "But I have two conditions. First, I will continue to do business with Star Textiles as before, but I want Max to leave that company and work for mine. Second, you and Max will move in with me. Is that acceptable?" "So, you're saying Max should transfer to your company?" "I'll talk to him about that. But why do you want us to live with you?" My father answered, sounding a bit uncomfortable. I just want my daughter close by. Okay. But why did you decide to reduce your dealings with Star Textiles in the first place? A new company approached us with a very attractive proposal, so we decided to do business with them. But after some research, we found that they have a history of breaking promises, so we were planning to call off the deal. So, even if I hadn't asked, Star Textiles would have been fine? Maybe. My father laughed, and I couldn't help but laugh too. After hanging up, I immediately relayed the conditions my father had proposed to Max. He was relieved that Star Textiles was no longer in jeopardy, but he seemed hesitant about moving to my father's company. It's hard for me to consider working for your father's company, Emily. I've always worked hard at Star Textiles, and I have a lot of good colleagues. I'll tell my father what you said. I called my father again, and when I relayed what Max had said, my father responded. He indeed said that, huh? He's a responsible, good man. Got it. He can keep doing his best at Star Textiles. But I'm not backing down about you guys moving into my house. Understood. After the phone call, Max was overjoyed when I told him what my dad had said. I told Max, just remember, don't let your mother know about my father's company. If she finds out, she'll start nagging again. Right, got it. Several weeks later, I decided to go back home for the birth of our child. Even though it's just my father and elderly grandmother at home, it's way better than being taken care of by my MIL. I waited until my MIL was having her afternoon tea in the living room, and I approached her. MIL, about my childbirth, I've decided to go back home. It's just my dad and my grandmother, but my grandma is still very active and full of energy. When I said this, my MIL looked at me with hateful eyes and said, by all means, go back. I don't want to see your face. I didn't feel anything when my MIL said this, as I had anticipated it. You won't have to see me anymore, so rest easy. What? I mean, I won't be coming back here anymore. And soon, Max will be moving to my parents' house as well. What are you talking about? Max is too busy with work to move. It's okay now. At that moment, Max came in and said to his mother, Mom, my company is going to be okay now. Emily helped me. What are you talking about? Emily's dad is the owner of my company's parent company. What? Hearing this, my MIL raised her voice and stared at me for a while before saying, Emily, I had no idea you were the daughter of the owner of the parent company of Max's. I've been very rude to you up until now. My MIL bowed deeply. It's okay now. May I ask you for a favor? I'd like to live together at your parents' house as well. Mom, no. You can stay here. Yeah, I don't want to live with you, MIL. I'd be reminded of all the things you've said to me up until now. I won't say anything else, please, I beg you. My MIL said with tears in her eyes. I know it seems cold, but that's not possible. Then, my MIL got on her knees, bowed her head to the floor, and pleaded. Please, I don't want to live without Max. Please. No, I can't. Mom, stop it. If you had been kind to Emily before, we could have lived together. But your past behavior has led to this. Give it up. I told my MIL, who continued to shed tears on the floor. Well, MIL, you brought this on yourself. Half a year later, Max, our newborn daughter Kay, and I visited my MIL's house. However, the house was void of any human presence, and the air was chillingly cold. Max was calling out loudly to his mother, but there was no response. Max, did you mention we were coming over? No, I thought it'd be a surprise. I wonder where she is. Just then, my MIL, who had become severely emaciated, came out of the bathroom. Even upon seeing us, she did not change her expression. The kitchen was piled high with remnants of instant noodles and dirty dishes were left stacked. Mom, are you okay? My MIL glanced at Max, but said nothing. MIL, we brought your favorite cake. As I held out the cake, my MIL rushed towards me, snatched the cake, and began devouring it immediately. I repeated what I had said before. Well, MIL, you brought this on yourself.